Hi, I'm Jolene. I drove 7 hours in a snowstorm, with my 2 kids, casserole on my lap, and hope packed in tight, just to be told there wasn't a seat for us at my own sister's holiday table. They said it was a misunderstanding. But how do you misunderstand a name left off the list? A child turned away from the cousin's table? A scarf, hand-knitted with love, tossed aside like clutter? What happens when silence isn't just awkward, but designed? And what do you do when the people who raised you start acting like you were never there to begin with? The text came on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked between a school pickup reminder and an alert about snow flurries moving in from the west. It was from Seraphine. Just one line. If you're free, you can drop by Saturday night for the holiday party. That was it. No, we'd love to see you. No, the kids would love to play with their cousins. Just a generic, sterile note that could have been meant for anyone. Still, I stared at it longer than I care to admit, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. I didn't reply right away. I kept rereading it, as if more warmth might emerge the 5th or 6th time around. It never did. For the rest of the evening, I hovered over my phone. Should I confirm? Ask what time? Offer to bring something? Finally, I texted. Would it be helpful if I brought a dish? I can make the sweet potato casserole the kids love. Read. No reply. Just that little gray word sitting beneath my message like an echo in an empty room. The next morning, Nadine asked if we were going to Aunt Seraphine's party. We've been practicing the Jingle Bell Rock dance at school, Mom. I want to show it to everyone. Her little brother chimed in, nodding furiously, his mouth full of cereal. And just like that, the decision was made for me. Maybe she had been busy. Maybe she was planning to reply. Maybe she didn't realize how much I needed to feel included. Not tolerated, not accommodated, just included. I let the kids help me pick out gifts for their cousins. I wrapped them carefully and labeled each one with hand-drawn reindeer tags. Nadine made one for Seraphine too, even though I hadn't told her about the text. She just assumed. That's the thing about kids. They expect people to show up, to care. I pulled out my knitting supplies and finished the scarf I'd started months ago. It was meant to be a birthday gift for Seraphine, but I never sent it. I told myself it wasn't the right color. Truth was, I wasn't sure she'd want anything from me. Still, I packed it anyway. By Friday, the snow warnings were more insistent. Blizzard conditions possible, the local news anchor announced, her voice chipper, like this was just festive December trivia. I sent one last message. Still planning to come by tomorrow evening. Let me know if anything changes. No response. But the silence this time, I interpreted as permission. Saturday arrived with biting cold. I loaded the car with coats, boots, and a dish of warm casserole wrapped in foil. I secured the gifts in the back, double-checked everyone's hats and gloves, and slid behind the wheel. The kids were giddy, singing carols, trading candy canes, their breath fogging the windows. We drove for nearly 7 hours. The storm that had been predicted, it arrived midway through Iowa. Visibility dropped. I gripped the wheel like it might fly out of my hands. But I kept going, because I had to believe this time would be different. I didn't tell the kids how bad the roads were, or how many times I considered turning around. All I said was, almost there. Even when the road signs blurred, and my hands went numb. When we finally reached Cedar Rapids, the snow had let up, but the cold settled in, like it meant to stay a while. I turned onto Seraphine Street, heart thudding. With the kids bundled up in the back seat and headlights barely cutting through the snow, I whispered to myself, this time will be different, right? Nadine's tiny hand tightened in mine, and I knew I couldn't let her see me break. The wind pushed hard against us as we stepped out of the car, snow crunching beneath our boots, the cold biting through every layer of clothing I'd carefully packed that morning. My son was already asleep in my arms, his cheek warm against my shoulder, oblivious to the tension I carried like a second coat. The driveway was mostly cleared, but the only open space had a sawhorse with a printed reserved sign wedged into a snowbank. A sleek silver SUV with gold vanity plates, Zinio 1, sat parked with just enough smugness to feel intentional. I parked down the street, the wheels sliding once before settling in a mound of slush. My gloves were damp before I'd made it halfway to the front steps, and by the time we reached the door, my arms ached, and Nadine's scarf had unraveled behind her. The front door was cracked open, music and laughter spilling out like steam from a boiling pot. But no one came to greet us. No one looked out. No familiar face lit up. Just warmth on the other side of the threshold, and us, standing in the cold. I pushed the door gently. The hallway beyond was full of coats hanging on hooks, boots neatly arranged, the smell of cinnamon and baked ham drifting through the air. I nudged Nadine forward, whispering for her to wipe her boots. She did as told, even if no one had made room for us. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished floors, twinkling lights, garland that must have cost a fortune. And there we stood, me with my casserole, the bag of gifts, and two kids not listed anywhere on the seating chart displayed near the dining room archway. A woman I didn't recognize, holding a flute of champagne, glanced at the chart and then at me. "Oh, are you someone's +1?" Before I could answer, she walked off, already mid-conversation with someone else. My eyes scanned the list again. All the names were typed, perfectly aligned, with placeholders matching plates on the long table in the dining room. Nadine tugged at my coat. "Mom, where's our seats?" I didn't have the heart to lie, so I didn't answer at all. I led her toward the coat rack, only to realize there was no space left. I ended up holding the coats over my arm while balancing the dish against my hip. I could feel the scarf I'd knitted for Seraphine poking out of the gift bag, now slightly damp. Aunt Marlene passed by without even looking in my direction, ushering Seraphine's twins toward the dessert table. Nadine followed instinctively, but was intercepted by one of the other cousins' moms with a tight smile and an even tighter grip on her daughter's arm. I turned slowly, the heat from the crowded house making me sweat, despite the chill still clinging to my sleeves. Across the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of Seraphine, her back turned, apron tied neatly, laughing at something a man beside her said. I thought she'd glance up, catch my eye, nod, even. But she didn't. Instead, Zinnia breezed past me with a glass of something red and festive in hand. She didn't even pause. "Seraphine didn't think you'd actually come in this weather," she whispered, flashing that grin of hers that always felt more blade than smile. I shifted the casserole dish in my grip, nearly dropping it. No one offered to take it from me. No one offered anything. A burst of laughter erupted from the living room. Someone called out a toast. Nadine leaned into me, whispering, "Do they know we're here?" I forced a smile. "I think they know." My hands trembled, not from the cold anymore, but from the sting of recognition. Not just at being ignored, not even at being unseen. This was something else entirely. This wasn't forgetting. It was deliberate. As I stood in that overheated foyer, the scarf I knitted for her still in my hand, I realized we weren't just unexpected. We were unwanted. I walked away from the screen, but what I couldn't walk away from was what Nadine said next. "Mom," she whispered, tugging lightly on my sleeve, "why aren't we in any of the pictures?" I froze. Her question didn't come from anger. It came from confusion. From that space where children expect love to look like inclusion, and they don't yet understand what it means to be deliberately left out. I bent slightly, smoothing her hair behind her ear and forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Maybe we'll be in the next one," I told her, my voice cracking halfway through the lie. She nodded, trusting me, and turned her eyes back to the screen, hopeful. We were standing in the back of the living room, the projector humming softly, casting golden light across the guests' faces. Everyone was gathered close, seated with wine glasses and paper plates balanced on their laps. The room buzzed with laughter and soft comments as the slideshow played. Seraphine's grand presentation, Our Family Through the Years. Image after image flashed across the screen. Birthday parties, vacations, holidays. But not once did I see my face. Not once did I spot Nadine or my son. It was as if we'd never existed in the family at all. A few frames featured events I had planned or hosted myself, now rewritten with Seraphine at the center, smiling like a queen in a crown she hadn't earned. Then it came. A childhood photo, one I remembered vividly. It was taken on our front porch. I was 6, Seraphine 9. We'd just gotten matching Easter dresses. Mom had wanted a clean shot, so she sat us side by side, told us to smile. But on this screen, the version shown had me cropped out completely. Seraphine was centered, flawless, holding her basket. The background ended just before where I had been sitting. I stared at it, heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the next line of piano music. The guests clapped politely. Some cooed about how sweet the memories were. A woman behind me murmured, "Seraphine always held the family together. She's just that kind of woman." I wanted to turn and laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I stood perfectly still, the scarf still folded in my bag, my son asleep in a corner armchair, Nadine watching a life she didn't recognize unfold in front of her. The video ended with a caption in bold script. "Through storms and sunshine, we've made it here, together." Together. What a word. Seraphine stood and gave a little bow, the kind you do when you're too self-satisfied to fake humility. "Thank you all for being part of this journey," she said. "I couldn't have done it without this family." The applause swelled. Zinnia dabbed the corner of her eye, like they'd just unveiled a national treasure. No one looked back at me. No one noticed that the only person who hadn't been clapped for was the one who used to clean up after these parties, who paid for the cake 2 Christmases ago when Mom's check bounced, who sewed costumes for 3 of those Halloween slides that had just skipped past like a dream. I felt like a ghost, present but unseen, heard but not remembered. When the lights came up, people began moving again, refilling glasses, shifting chairs. Nadine leaned her head on my side and whispered, "I thought they said everyone was in the video." I didn't answer. What could I say? Instead, I watched Seraphine hug a guest and thank her for the beautiful comment. I caught just enough of the exchange to hear, "Well, you've always been the glue." No one asked where I'd gone. No one mentioned my name. I stepped back toward the foyer, my feet moving on instinct more than decision. I didn't feel hurt anymore. Not exactly. What I felt was something colder, clearer, a space inside me where hope used to live, now quiet, settling. Maybe I wasn't just unwelcome. Maybe I'd already been erased. Nadine tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go home?" she asked softly. I crouched beside her, brushing hair from her cheek, my voice low. "Soon, sweetheart. Just a little longer, okay?" She nodded, but the light in her eyes had dulled since we walked through that front door. As she wandered back toward the punch table, I noticed a small folding table tucked beside the entryway, cluttered with unused name tags. One in particular caught my eye. A white rectangle, barely legible, scribbled in Sharpie, +1, Nadine. No mention of me, no last name. Just a +1 and my daughter, like we were add-ons to someone else's invitation. I felt the heat rise in my face as I picked it up, ran my thumb across the corner. Someone behind me said, "Is that your student?" I turned. An older woman I vaguely recognized from Seraphine's PTA circle. She smiled like it was a compliment. "Your babysitting style is so natural." I don't remember correcting her out loud. I remember my lips parting. I remember the silence I let settle between us instead. I retreated toward the living room, trying to collect myself. Zinnia intercepted me with her usual saccharine charm. "Nadine looks so adorable. That dress is darling. Thrifted, I bet?" Her voice dripped with artificial warmth. "Very on trend. So sustainable these days." Before I could respond, she was gone, her heels clicking across the hardwood like punctuation. I caught a glimpse of Seraphine standing by the fireplace, wineglass in hand. She glanced at the scarf I'd left carefully folded atop the gift bag earlier, the one I'd knitted for her in soft rose wool. She leaned toward another guest and said, My little one made me something like that in kindergarten. We framed it. The other woman laughed. I stepped into the hallway, pulling my phone from my coat pocket, tapping my screen as if I were checking an urgent message. In truth, I opened my banking app. The auto transfer to Seraphine, $600 a month, was still active, still unacknowledged, still expected. I hovered over the cancel button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I walked toward the back of the house where the gift exchange table had been set up. Boxes were stacked high, most with glittery bows and embossed tags. There were printed signs organizing the piles by family groups. I found one labeled Seraphine and Family. The list had names in delicate script. Seraphine, her children, even Zinnia. No mention of me, or Nadine, or my son. A group stood nearby, chuckling over something someone said. I recognized Seraphine's voice. Everyone who confirmed is listed. I had to keep it organized. I cleared my throat, forcing calm. I did text you. I asked what to bring. Seraphine turned, not startled, not apologetic, just annoyed. You didn't follow up. I figured that meant no. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. But something in me cracked, not loudly, but finally. I walked away without another word, stepping back toward the main hallway. My heart pounded, not from shame, but from certainty. I knew in that moment, something inside me had shifted. The part that kept hoping they'd eventually see me. That part was quiet now. One more slight, and I was done pretending this was my family. I found Nadine sitting by the staircase, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes trained on the floor. I sat beside her, placing the name tag in her lap. "What's this?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just something that doesn't belong." I stared at my name left off the list again, and this time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a message. The din of conversation had softened to a steady murmur, and Nadine had gone quiet. She leaned into me as we stood near the hallway, her small voice cutting through the haze. "Can we go home now, Mom?" I crouched to her level, brushing a curl from her forehead, willing a smile to form. "Not yet," I whispered, "but soon." She nodded without pressing. Even she could sense it, the tension that hovered like thick fog in a room filled with warm lighting and colder hearts. Back near the refreshment table, Seraphine was introducing one of Zinnia's friends to a circle of guests. I stood only a few feet away, within full view, yet my presence was ignored like wallpaper. I shifted my weight, thinking maybe someone would make eye contact. No one did. Zinnia's friend asked, "Is everyone here family?" Zinnia chuckled, glancing toward me, but speaking past me. "Oh, we all have our roles here. Some people support from the sidelines." I blinked. A caterer walked by and said, "Excuse me, can you move that tray closer to the drinks?" It wasn't until I turned that he realized I wasn't staff. "Oh, sorry, I thought..." I gave a short nod and stepped back. No apology needed. The damage was already done. The clinking of glasses drew the crowd's attention to the fireplace, where Seraphine held her wine aloft. "Just a quick toast," she said, smile polished, posture impeccable. "To those who make this possible, Mom, for her wisdom, myself, for pulling it all together, and to the friends who remind us what real family feels like." There was a pause. No mention of me. Of course. Then she said it, the line that made my stomach churn. "This family thrives because we let go of what doesn't serve us." The room murmured in agreement. I caught someone nodding like they were in church. Nadine, standing beside the dessert table, had been quietly watching Seraphine's assistant rearrange the name cards for the kids' table. She tugged on my sleeve again. "Mom, my name's not on there." I walked over, and sure enough, only Seraphine's kids and the other cousins were listed. Not Nadine, not my son. I turned to the assistant. "Excuse me, was this a mistake?" She gave a half smile. "We just included the children who RSVP'd formally. It helps with headcount." We spoke. I texted, twice. Well, I guess it didn't get logged. Seraphine walked over then, tone breezy, but her eyes fixed and unflinching. Was I ever meant to feel welcome here tonight? I asked, low and steady. She exhaled through her nose. You always make things harder than they need to be, Jolene. That sentence wasn't new. It was recycled, reused whenever I dared to express discomfort, challenge a decision, or exist too loudly. I looked at Nadine, standing quietly with her hands clasped in front of her. I didn't yell, I didn't make a scene, but I picked up the scarf from the gift bag. I folded it neatly. I helped Nadine into her coat, then wrapped my son's jacket around him, where he sat half asleep on a chair. I turned to Seraphine one last time and said, if I had known silence was the price of belonging, I would have spoken up sooner. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking. And just as I touched the doorknob, someone behind me said the one thing that made me stop cold. The snow had thickened against the windows, soft flakes drifting like ash in the yellow porch light. Inside, the room was still buzzing, voices layered over music, forks clinking against porcelain, laughter rising at the punchline of someone else's holiday anecdote. But I wasn't hearing any of it. A cousin, Rachel, I think, pulled me aside near the hallway. She gave me that gentle, warning smile Midwestern women have perfected. The one that says, I mean well, right before it cuts. Jolene, she said softly, Seraphine's trying to keep things peaceful tonight. Maybe don't make this about you. I tilted my head slightly. That's funny, I said, calm and quiet, because it already is about me. I'm just the only one polite enough not to say it. She blinked, unsure what to do with my answer. I walked past her before she had time to figure it out. Nadine and her little brother were standing near the kids' table with their paper plates in hand, waiting for a space to open up. I watched one of Seraphine's sons wave them off, not cruelly, but with an awkward smile. Those seats are for the cousins. Before Nadine could ask why, another child, older, sharper, muttered under his breath, We're not really related anyway. My breath caught. I crossed the room, took Nadine's hand, and crouched beside her. You're okay, I whispered. You didn't do anything wrong. She nodded, but didn't smile. Her grip tightened around the plate she still hadn't touched. I stood and scanned the room until I found Seraphine holding court near the bar. I walked straight to her, careful not to raise my voice. Was this your idea? I asked. To make sure your nieces don't feel like family? She blinked, caught off guard, but recovered instantly. We already talked about this, Jolene. You're always reading into things. Reading into things. As if I was making up the name tag. The seating chart, the cropped photos, the tone. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady as I tapped open the banking app. The familiar transaction sat there, pre-scheduled. $600, Seraphine W, monthly transfer. I canceled it in 3 seconds. She noticed. What are you doing? She asked. I looked her in the eye and said, Since we're reading into things, I'll read into this too. She opened her mouth like she wanted to reply, but nothing came out. I walked away before she could find the words. I gathered the kids, still in their coats, and took one last glance around the room. No one was looking at us. Not really. They were too busy pretending we weren't there to begin with. As I stepped outside, Seraphine's voice rang out behind me. Are you really doing this on Christmas? I turned, holding the door just wide enough for my voice to reach her. You did it first. And then I stepped into the cold. The air outside was sharp against my cheeks, the kind of cold that cuts clean. But it still felt warmer than staying inside. Instead, I turned toward what mattered. My kids, and what came next. We had made it to the car. Nadine was already buckled in, quiet but alert, watching me with the kind of stillness only kids develop when they're afraid of pushing too hard. I had just tucked her brother into his car seat when I realized something. Her gloves. They weren't on her hands, weren't in her coat pocket. She must have dropped them inside. maybe by the stairs. I considered leaving them. They were just gloves. But my name had been left behind too many times that night. I couldn't leave anything else behind. "I'll be right back," I told Nadine. The front door creaked open. The warmth hit me again. Thick, too much. A cloying contrast to the bite of winter air. Most of the guests had moved to the back of the house. Music still played, softer now, blending into low voices and laughter. I moved quietly through the hallway and found her gloves near the banister. As I bent to pick them up, I heard my name. "She was always the storm," Seraphine was saying. Her voice drifted through the cracked door of the kitchen. "We built peace without her." I froze. Zinnia's laugh followed. "You handled her perfectly tonight. Honestly, I don't know how you do it." "She thrives on drama," Seraphine said. "We had to start protecting our space. For the kids." I felt my throat close. For the kids. That was the line they always used to excuse themselves. They weren't doing it to be cruel. They were doing it for the children. How convenient. "I think she wanted a scene," Zinnia continued. "She always does." Seraphine's answer was a soft, practiced sigh. "Yeah, but she knows better than to try it in front of me." Laughter followed. I stepped back. The gloves now felt heavy in my hand. Down the hallway, I passed the entry table again. A guest I didn't recognize was chatting with someone and glanced toward me. "Is that the sister who looked upset earlier?" she asked. Seraphine's voice, again, smooth and dismissive. "She's had a hard year. We didn't want to overwhelm her with expectations." And my mother, Lavinia, was there too. I didn't see her, but I heard her agree. Just a nod, maybe. A complicit silence. No defense. No truth. I turned toward the window near the dining room. A little cousin, maybe 5 years old, stood on a chair by the curtain. He spotted me, smiled, and waved enthusiastically. I waved back. He didn't know better. Not yet. He didn't know what it meant to be erased while standing in the room. I had been that child once, too, watching adults perform rituals of kindness while leaving out the inconvenient parts. I turned from the window and walked slowly back toward the kitchen. They were mid-toast again. Seraphine raised her glass. "To those who actually show up, emotionally and otherwise," she said. Zinnia laughed first, loud and clear. Then others followed. Even my mother. Not a cackle, not a sneer. Just a small, knowing chuckle, like someone nodding at a well-timed joke. My hands were steady now, not cold anymore. Not angry either. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make eye contact. I slipped out the same door I had entered, gloves in hand, letting it shut behind me without a sound. The air was sharper now, the wind stronger, but I didn't pull my coat tighter. I didn't shiver. As I walked back to the car, I whispered to myself, "They don't get to hurt me again. Not like this." The car lights blinked as I approached. Nadine watched me through the window, her eyes wide. I opened the door, handed her the gloves, and kissed her forehead. Then I slid into the driver's seat, looked straight ahead, and let the house disappear behind me. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want them to see me leave. The next morning, I woke to quiet. The snow was still falling, though gentler now, as if the sky itself had worn itself out from the storm. My body ached in ways I couldn't name, not from strain, but from holding everything in for too long. The kids were still asleep, tangled in blankets on the couch, where they'd fallen the night before, after hot chocolate and cartoons. I let them be. They didn't need to wake up to my processing. I brewed coffee, stood by the window, and watched the world outside soften under white. For a moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved, lighter than I had in days. Back in the living room, I grabbed my laptop and opened a blank post. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew I had to say it with care. Not for Seraphine, not for the others, for myself. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I wrote what happened, how it felt walking into a room with no place cards, no eye contact, and no acknowledgement. I described how my daughter clutched her plate, only to be told the seats weren't meant for her. How my name had been a +1. How our family video was edited so tightly, I'd been cropped out of my own childhood. I wrote it through my kids' eyes. The small humiliations that added up to a message. You are not one of us. Then I attached the photos. A snapshot of the name tag, +1, Nadine. The seating chart with our names missing. The blurry still of the slideshow frame, where half my arm had made the cut, but nothing else. Below it, I typed, some families erase with silence. Some do it with planning. I hit post. At first, nothing, just silence. It sat there on my profile like a weight I dared to set down in public. But within the hour, the comments started. Wait, this is awful. I saw that video. I've felt this too. Thank you for saying it. Family isn't blood. It's who shows up. Then came the private messages. Distant cousins, one of Seraphine's co-workers, someone I barely remembered from a school fundraiser 2 years ago. I noticed it that night. I just didn't know if it was my place to say something. Your daughter was so sweet. I'm sorry that happened. And then the message I'd been waiting for. From Seraphine. You're being dramatic. Followed by, take the post down before you embarrass everyone. I stared at the words for a long time, rereading them like I used to reread her invitations, hoping to find warmth in them that wasn't there. I replied, no, I'm done hiding the truth. She didn't respond after that. Later, a neighbor texted me. I heard she lost a small speaking gig. Something about public image. I didn't bring it up. I didn't ask her to. It wasn't about payback. I hadn't posted for revenge. I posted because erasure is a kind of violence, and silence only feeds it. Sometimes telling the truth isn't revenge, it's release. I had nothing left to explain, and that was freedom. 2 days had passed since I shared the post. The snow had softened overnight, melting in uneven streaks across the sidewalks. The air was warmer now, almost forgiving. The kind of air that lets you breathe without feeling like every inhale scrapes against something raw. The notifications on my phone had slowed. The initial wave of messages, comments, and quiet affirmations had crested and receded. What remained now were the echoes, gentle, steady, undeniable. What surprised me most wasn't the strangers who reached out. It was the familiar names, neighbors, old classmates, even Seraphine's former co-worker, who sent a message that simply said, I always saw how she spoke to you. I wish I'd said something. And yet, from my own family, nothing. No call, no text. Not even a passive-aggressive emoji reaction. Just the same silence they'd wrapped around me for years, now worn like a uniform. It didn't sting the same way anymore. It registered more like confirmation. Later that afternoon, as I was folding laundry, Nadine wandered into the room, dragging her sketchbook behind her. She climbed onto the couch beside me and asked, Is Grandma mad at us? The question was soft, but her eyes stayed fixed on mine, searching for something solid. I took a breath. I think Grandma doesn't know how to say what she really feels. And sometimes people stay quiet because they're scared. Scared of losing comfort. Scared of upsetting other people. It doesn't mean they're mad. She nodded slowly. But they didn't say sorry. No, they didn't, I said. And they might not. But that doesn't mean we did something wrong. She accepted that more easily than I expected. Maybe kids understand more than we give them credit for. Or maybe she'd already learned what I spent decades pretending not to know. That evening, just before dinner, I heard the thud on the porch. I opened the door and saw a box. No label, no handwriting, but I recognized the wrapping paper. It was the same one I'd used for the gifts we brought to the party. Inside were all the items I'd left behind. The scarf, still folded, untouched. The cookies Nadine had helped bake, now stale and crumbly. A gift I had bought for Lavinia, unopened, with the tag still attached. No note, no explanation, just a quiet, deliberate return of everything I'd tried to offer. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, the box in my arms growing heavier by the second. It wasn't the weight of the items, it was the message. We don't want this. Or you. I brought the box inside and set it in the hallway. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at it until it stopped feeling like a rejection and started feeling like what it was. Proof. They weren't my home anymore, just my history. Over the next few days, I moved through routines like muscle memory, grocery runs, school pickups, client calls. But something inside had shifted. I stopped checking my phone for a response that wasn't coming. I stopped replaying the slideshow in my head, the seating chart, the whispers behind the kitchen door. One night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and my journal. I hadn't written in it since before the divorce, but tonight, the words came. I spent years trying to earn something that should have been mine by birthright. A seat at the table, a place in the photo, a name that didn't need explaining. I paused, then continued. Belonging doesn't have to be earned. If it does, it isn't real. I closed the journal and looked around the room. Toys scattered under the couch, crumbs on the floor, the faint sound of my son snoring down the hall. Everything imperfect, and still, everything mine. The silence from them was loud, but inside me, something was finally quiet. Something was finally quiet. Not in the world around me. People were still talking. But inside, the noise had gone. The constant self-questioning, the replaying of words I wished I had said or taken back, the mental loops of every party, every birthday, every moment I'd swallowed my own voice just to keep peace. Gone. Replaced by stillness. It had been a week since I shared the post. The snow outside had melted in patches, leaving behind gray slush and exposed earth, as if the ground itself was shaking off the weight of December. At school pickup, I noticed a few glances. Not the kind that made your shoulders tighten, but the kind that lingered a little longer than usual. One mom I barely knew, Annette, I think, offered a small smile as she passed me. I read your post, she said under her breath, like it was a confession. You told a story a lot of us don't have the courage to share. I nodded, thanking her. We didn't need more than that. In the grocery store, a former neighbor from 3 blocks over stopped me in the cereal aisle. Didn't expect you to be the one to speak up, she said, but I'm glad someone did. Not one word had come from Seraphine since that last text, but I heard from others. Her community board seat's been postponed, a mutual friend mentioned casually over coffee, and I think she lost that contract with the nonprofit. You didn't hear it from me. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I'd stopped keeping score. The same silence that once crushed me had become insulation. It kept me from taking pleasure in her fall, but also from feeling guilty that it was happening at all. One afternoon, I came home to find a grocery bag on my porch. No receipt, no note, no name. Just a box of my favorite tea, a loaf of fresh sourdough, some fruit, and a pack of my son's granola bars. I knew it was from Lavinia. It was her way. She never apologized. She provided groceries in place of words. I brought the bag inside and unpacked it without a second thought. Sometimes silence was still the wrong answer, but for once, it felt like the right gesture. A returned favor without the need for explanation. I didn't call to say thank you, and she didn't text to check in. Later that night, while Nadine was doing her homework, I scrolled through my phone and saw Zinnia had posted a video. She didn't say my name, but the tone was unmistakable. It's so easy to misinterpret things, she said, addressing her followers. When someone feels excluded, it doesn't always mean they were. Sometimes people just isolate themselves. The comment section didn't go the way she'd hoped. I saw that event. She wasn't imagining it. Calling someone invisible isn't a misunderstanding. You don't get to rewrite someone else's erasure. I didn't join the thread. I didn't need to. By the weekend, the video had been deleted. I took Nadine shopping that Sunday. We walked through the store like it was any other day. She grabbed a can of whipped cream and whispered, "Hot cocoa tonight?" Absolutely, I said. We passed two women in the frozen section, whispering to each other. One made eye contact with me and gave a polite, acknowledging nod. Not sympathy, recognition. I used to dread those moments, that public exposure, but now I welcomed it. I wasn't a problem to be solved or a scandal to be buried. I was just someone who finally said it out loud. As we waited in line, Nadine leaned against me, humming. I looked down at her and smiled. I wasn't invisible anymore, not because they saw me, but because I saw myself. Sometimes vindication doesn't roar. It just walks beside you while you buy milk. And that kind of silence, for once, brought peace. 2 weeks had passed since the party. The snow, once harsh and heavy, had started to pull back from sidewalks and curbs, revealing slushy grass and forgotten leaves. Life in Cedar Rapids moved forward with quiet steps and bundled coats. So did I. The voicemail came on a Thursday morning, between making school lunches and ironing Nadine's shirt for picture day. I missed the call, but the moment I saw the name, Mom, I knew it wouldn't say much. I pressed play while buttering toast. I hope you and the kids are warm, she said. That was it. No mention of the party, no mention of the post, no apology. Just ambient concern, like she was commenting on the weather. The kind of message you leave when you don't want to say anything real, but feel like you should say something. I didn't call back. That afternoon, while sorting through a drawer of old documents, I found an envelope of family photos I hadn't seen in years. The kind printed at drugstores, with dates in the corners and thumbprints smudging the edges. I sat on the floor and sifted through them one by one. Birthdays, Thanksgivings, summers at the lake. I studied the younger versions of us, smiling in swimsuits and Christmas pajamas. There was one picture of Dad holding me on his shoulders, his hand shielding my eyes from the sun. I whispered to it like he could hear me. You tried. I think you did. The next day, just after dinner, there was a knock at the door. Elliot stood on the porch, hands in his coat pockets, expression tight but kind. I won't stay, he said. I just wanted to say you were right. We all knew it. We just didn't know how to admit it. He handed me a small package, wrapped in brown paper, no tape, no embellishments. Inside was a photograph, a print of the family group shot from 2 summers ago, the one Seraphine had posted online, with a filter so strong I looked translucent. This version wasn't edited. I was in it, clear, solid, smiling. He didn't wait for a thank you. He didn't try to hug me, just nodded once and walked back to his car. I didn't frame the photo, but I put it on the fridge, not to remember the people in it, but to remember that I didn't vanish. I stayed in the frame, even when they tried to crop me out. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the dining table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. I wrote a letter, not to send, just to finish something that had stayed unfinished in my chest. It started with, "Dear Mom," and ended with, "I forgive you, but I remember everything." I folded it once, then twice, and walked outside. The cold nipped at my fingers as I lit the corner of the page with a match and let the letter burn in the tin bucket we kept for ashes. The flame curled the paper fast, devouring each word until there was nothing left but gray. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The goodbye was never said out loud, but I think we all heard it. The snow had melted entirely by the first week of March. The air still carried a bite in the mornings, but sidewalks were clear, birds had returned, and there were small yellow flowers stubbornly blooming by the library steps. That's where we met. Me and the women who, like me, had once thought they were the only ones left standing in a room that never made space for them. We called it the uninvited circle. Not as a joke, but as a truth we'd all earned. Every Thursday evening, we gathered in the back room of the public library. Some came in silence, others arrived talking, needing to speak before they lost the nerve. We brought stories, some brought tears. I brought cookies Nadine helped me bake. Nothing fancy, just familiar. We didn't promise each other healing. We promised to witness. Sometimes that was more than enough. Nadine doesn't ask about Seraphine anymore. She doesn't bring up her cousins or wonder aloud about birthdays. One afternoon, her teacher sent home a class art project, a family tree. She'd drawn herself, her brother, our dog, and me, at the center. No grandparents, no aunts, no fillers, just us. I framed it, not because it was complete, but because it was honest. Later that week, we ran into Seraphine outside the market. She was with someone I didn't know, dressed in a beige coat that looked like it hadn't seen dirt in years. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and she looked away. I didn't. I smiled, not out of pity or superiority, but because I wasn't broken anymore. She could carry her silence if she wanted. It didn't belong to me anymore. Back at home, after putting away groceries, I opened my journal again. It had become a quiet ritual, something I'd given up for years and slowly found my way back to. I reread one of my first entries after the party. I'm done begging to be seen. Tonight, I wrote a new line beneath it. Now, I build places where others feel visible. That was the shift. Not reclaiming space someone denied me, but creating space that couldn't be taken away. On Sunday, we went to the park. The kids ran through grass that was still damp but no longer frozen. I caught them mid-laugh, snapped a photo. Sunlight catching the curl in my son's hair. Nadine's cheeks pink from running, both of them full of life. I printed the photo that night. The next morning, I slipped it into an envelope and addressed it to Lavinia. No note, no apology asked. But on the back, I wrote, "This is what family looks like to me. No caption needed." I placed it in the mailbox before I could second-guess it. Then I stood at the curb, breathing in the thawing spring. I didn't reclaim a family. I reclaimed myself. And that was more than enough. Sometimes, it takes being erased to realize you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. I spent years trying to mold myself into someone more acceptable, more quiet, more convenient for others. But the moment I stopped asking for space and started creating my own, everything changed. This isn't just about family. It's about every room that made you feel small, every table you were left out of, every version of the story where you were conveniently forgotten. You don't have to prove your worth to people who benefit from your silence. You don't have to shrink to be allowed to stay. I hope my story gives you the strength to speak up, to step out, or to simply choose peace, even if it means choosing yourself over tradition. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own story? What did you do when you realized you were no longer welcome, or never truly were? Share your experience in the comments. If this video spoke to you, drop a 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, let me know why and where you're tuning in. I love hearing your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want more stories that touch the heart, challenge silence, and celebrate finding your voice. You're not alone, and your voice matters here.